All righty. Well, typical. Hey, what's up, everybody? Happy Halloween Eve out there. Welcome to the Friday edition of Burn It Down with Kim Brown. I'm your host, Kim Brown. I am broadcasting to y'all from Prince George's County, Maryland, and we are just several days away, not even several. I think we have entered the few days away portion of the program as we are speeding towards Tuesday, election day. And, you know, it could go either way, everybody. We could be looking at perhaps a division of the balance of power in Washington. Should Trump lose, and should Democrats be able to flip a sufficient number of Senate seats? Or we could be entering the official days of a dictatorship, of a demagogue rule here in this country. And not to say that we're not currently experiencing that, or some version of fascism, of course, with the amount of foolery put forth by the Trump administration in the form of just general corruption. And of course, the extrajudicial killing of the Antifa activists out in Washington state, where Donald Trump bragged that his U.S. Marshals did what needed to be done. Yeah, that's bad shit, y'all. That means that we're headed in a very, very bad place when the president of the United States can stand up there with pride and, of course, without fear of reprisal, of bragging about such measures. But there's been a lot happening across the country this week. Of course, the horrific killings of two Black men, one in Philadelphia, setting off a tremendous uprising up there in Philadelphia, another in Washington, D.C. Because I'm in the D.C. area, I'm not exactly sure whether or not the story of Karan Hilton Brown is national news, but I will be bringing you some updates because Washington, like a lot of big urban places, is governed by a Black mayor. In the case of DC, Muriel Bowser. And activists, especially those who advocate defunding the police, abolishing the police, have noted very loudly and vociferously that Muriel Bowser has sicked the Metropolitan Police Department, DC police, upon protesters demonstrating their civil rights in the streets. So we have a lot of different stuff to get to. So I'd like to introduce our two guests today. I'm very excited to have these two young men on with us because I am auntie. So I need the youths to come and de-auntie me from time to time. And and let me know what's going on out there in those streets. So I'd like to welcome a young man who had joined us previously on Stir Crazy. He is from Detroit, Michigan. Kenneth Williams is a communication manager for Detroit Action. Hey, Kenneth is also a pop culture writer and an on-air host for Blavity News. Welcome back, Kenneth. Nice to see your beautiful glowing face.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with y'all.
Thank you so much. And Kenneth brought a friend, Ashton Pemberton. Ashton is currently a PhD student studying race in higher education out at UCLA. His work focuses on the devastating impacts of anti-Black racism and toxic masculinity. Ashton hopes to use media and social entrepreneurship in his fight for social injustice, or against social injustice in all forms. Ashton, we appreciate you making some time for us today as well.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So, gentlemen, let's see, where shall we begin? And my apologies for just generalizing, gentlemen. I did not ask y'all your pronouns, so my bad about that. Again, you have to de-auntie me from time to time. So, you know, we have a lot of video to get to, but of course we have so much video. It's almost too much video. So I'm kind of debating on where we should begin right now. And why not? Let us just go ahead and start with the election because, you know, not only the race for the White House is happening, which is important, but, you know, a lot of important down ballot races are happening. And I feel like Democratic states are kind of quiet right now. Like here in the state of Maryland, I think we have maybe one or two congressional seats that are, you know, happening in congressional races, but they're not very competitive. You know, it's like the Democrat is pretty much assured to win some of these races. And I know that's the case in different places like New York and, you know, California at the moment. But Michigan, Kenneth, Michigan is almost turning into like the new Florida, right? Every 4 years, especially for the national elections, for the presidential race, Michigan is where all eyes turn. And as of 2016, Donald Trump was able to pull off a bit of a coup in Michigan, pardon the pun, but taking the state red for the first time in a good long time and by a very, very small number of votes. And a lot has been transpiring in Michigan really since the summer, with the state taking extraordinary measures to combat the COVID virus pandemic, much to the chagrin of, I think, a lot of maybe white business owners. Kenny, maybe you can enlighten me or correct me if I'm mistaken about that. There was a plot unearthed by the FBI in recent weeks where allegedly white supremacists, domestic terrorists, I'm not going to call them militia. Militia sounds like they in the woods with paintball guns. No, these brothers was out there. And when I say brothers, I mean white brothers. They was out there with big time machinery. They was trying to do big time things, not little time things with them guns, threatening to blow up Gretchen Whitmer's vacation home, in addition to threats against some other governors. And there's some other developing news in Michigan where a court recently ruled that open carry at the polls will be allowed on Election Day. So, Kenny, I know I just threw a lot at you right there, so let me take it one at a time. What is the temperature in Michigan right now surrounding this election, especially from your perspective? And I know that you were at an event for Detroit Action. Tell us about that, please.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And are you able to hear me fine? Just because I know I'm in my car. Okay,
yes, we
perfect.
Can.
So, yes, like Kim said, in addition to being a pop culture writer and on-air host for Blavity, I'm the communications manager for Detroit Action. We're a member-led grassroots organization who builds political power for Black and Brown Detroiters. So the sentiment in Detroit is kind of mixed because, you have organizers like myself and all of my colleagues and people in similar organizations who are doing this work, who are meeting people where they at through texting, social media, emails, calls, whatever you may name it, to really encourage people to get out there and vote. But then on the other hand, you have these dangerous, these dirty, uncouth white supremacists roaming around trying to kidnap the governor, trying to blow up vacation homes and whatnot, and who are really, who I suspect will probably try to do a lot of voter intimidation on Tuesday. So it's kind of mixed. You have the people of color who are doing all the work, and then you have like these white terrorists who are roaming around, missing teeth and intelligence to match, really just trying to cause mayhem. So it's really, really been interesting. So I don't know how Election Day will look, but I suspect that, with the open carry thing happening at the polls, I suspect that white supremacists are going to feel emboldened to come with their guns and their little tactics and try to scare people, especially people of color and in populations with lots of people of color. So that's what we're worried about, and we're trying to, that's what we anticipate. So it's interesting.
Kenny, according to a report in the Detroit News, and Dwayne, I think we do have this tweet, 2 conservative activists to be tried in Detroit over robocalls. So what the Detroit News is reporting, Jacob Wall and Jack Berkman were arraigned in the 36th District Court. Is that Judge Mathis's old court? It might be. I'm a big fan of Judge Mathis, by the way. So what prosecutors allege is that these 2 conservatives, can we pop up that tweet, Dwayne? These conservatives are accused of orchestrating a campaign of recordings, robocalls, with claims aimed at discouraging Black voters from making absentee ballots. The Detroit News goes on to report the recordings included false warnings that voters' personal information was being added to a database made available to law enforcement. In one of the emails presented in court, a state investigator identified Wall and Berkman as individuals who wrote the emails and made reference to the robocall. So there's already foolery afoot happening in Michigan and aimed at Black voters in Detroit. And from what I can understand from some of the reporting that I've seen on the ground, the city of Detroit is at least expecting at least a 50% turnout. Do you feel as though Black Detroiters, Black and brown people in your city are determined to sort of show up this time, maybe in ways that didn't happen in 2016?
Yeah, I feel like, and I always feel like there's a determination amongst Black people, especially in Detroit, to show up and vote. And I honestly get annoyed when they put so much emphasis on Black people and saying, go vote, make sure you vote. But are you putting, not you, Kim, in particular, but I say this to like people who are saying like celebrities or other parties and whatnot, like, are they putting the same energy and the same effort into, into talking to these white women who, made Trump win in 2016? These white conservative people, like their mamas, their daddies, and their hillbilly cousins, are they putting that same energy towards them and asking them to vote Democrat and, to show up for this election? Because we gonna always show up. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many organizers who have been working tirelessly since the beginning of the year, since last year, to turn out and to show up. So I don't even think the question is, are we determined? I think it's, where is that same energy why is that same energy not being put towards white people who are always fumbling the ball?
Ashton, let me flip to you because, we've had a lot of California activists and organizers on this show and previous shows. And they always tell us that basically, California is not as progressive as advertised, despite the fact that California is very likely going to go for Joe Biden, as it has gone for Democrats many previous elections beforehand. But it's not stopping some conservatives, rather, from trying to affect the outcome. From what I understand, there's been reporting surrounding the drop-off boxes for filled out ballots and how they're being collected by some conservative groups, which the state has asked them to kindly stop doing that. What types of voter suppression are you aware of, or that is being reported in California, or perhaps that you've even seen or experienced? Is that something that's also happening where you are?
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate enough to be a part of circles who are constantly keeping me informed about things like the ballots not being sort of correct. The robocalls are not necessarily surprising me, but I think to go back to a point that Kenny was making, I think that there has to be more conversations with folks who are still sort of in the middle of this Trump situation, right? Because I think that there's not enough of a conversation being had with folks who don't know whether they're voting for Trump or Biden. And so being aware of the voter suppression tactics is one thing, but I also think that, like Kenneth said, our circles are telling us about these different tactics and keeping us aware of these different tactics. And so for us, there has to be a conversation about how do we engage these folks who are still not sure about voting, and how do we engage these folks who are holding on to certain conservative values that will make them vote for Trump, even if they don't totally agree with Trump's, all of his policies and his beliefs. And so I think that that's sort of more of what I'm seeing in California. But all of the different tactics you mentioned, I wouldn't be surprised if they were going on somewhere. And I think that it's our responsibility to, make sure that we're informing each other constantly and holding each other accountable. And so I've been blessed enough to have people in my circle to help do that. And hopefully that's something that is spreading in California.
Since we're in this discussion sort of about voter suppression, and I'm really loath to examine like the celebrity, the politics of celebrity. But this week has been very hard to ignore. And I know it's a big distraction, but I think it's worthy of at least a couple of moments of discussion, where it was tweeted out last night, I believe, by Lil Wayne, taking a picture with Donald Trump and saying that he supports Donald Trump. Now, Lil Wayne is just the latest male rapper to come out in favor of Trump, in addition to 50 Cent and, of course, most infamously, Kanye West. Many are criticizing these three artists as saying that they're being used as pawns, that this is just an attempt to siphon off portions of the Black vote for Donald Trump, because this election could be very close. It could come down to just, a couple of percentage points of the Black vote to perhaps push Trump over the top in some of these more tightly contested states. Ashton, let me start with you. I mean, should we even pay attention to these? Because are they even worthy of our conversation or even our momentary looking over in their direction? Do we give a shit what Lil Wayne thinks about who the president should be, 50 Cent or Kanye for that matter? I mean, are these dudes inconsequential politically? Are they being used as pawns, or are they indeed seriously trying to engage Black voters to go for Trump?
And thank you so much for that question. I think that it's interesting because Lil Wayne, 50 Cent, those two don't necessarily have a track record with trying to do things that necessarily uplift the Black community. They do things that uplift themselves from a business perspective. But take someone like Ice Cube, who has done things for the Black community and has sort of been a trailblazer. I think that even folks like him can feel like, hey, I can talk to both parties and I can sort of try to get to a solution. But what we have to understand is that oftentimes Republicans don't have to even have an interest in Black voters. I remember being at a policy conference and talking to a prominent Black Republican who tried to get Republicans to target the Black demographics more. And the Republicans told him, like, why would we do that? We don't need to, right? And there's so many people of color and other types of minorities that might have that one conservative value that will make them vote for a Republican, even if they don't agree with the majority of the policy. So maybe you really love your guns, or maybe you are not into abortion, or maybe you're anti-LGBTQIA+, and so you vote that way. And so Republicans never have an incentive to vote for Black people. And so even for someone like an Ice Cube, you have to realize that all they're going to do is use you as a pawn, like, as you said, Kim, and plaster you, and then sort of try to section and siphon off those Black voters. If Republicans were actually very serious about this, they would be talking to folks who have dedicated their lives to this. People like Angela Rye, people like Maxine Waters, God rest his soul, former Congressman John Lewis. But they've had 4 years to do that, right? And they haven't. And for you to, I know Ice Cube read a book about politics, but I wouldn't read one book about rapping and think that I was a rap star. Right. And so if Black people need to do anything, or celebrities need to do anything, it's to galvanize the politicians and the activists who have dedicated their lives to this, and create a group and create policies based on that, and to talk to people who actually have a track record of caring about Black folks intensely and radically, which unfortunately many Republicans haven't.
Kenneth, I feel like some of the sort of disappointment in some of these rappers may be a little bit generational. Like I said, I'm y'all's auntie in this respect. I'm older than y'all, so like I grew up like as an actual child listening to Ice Cube. 50 Cent, I was kind of hit or miss. Kanye, like the first 3 albums, Kanye, College Dropout, Late Registration, Graduation, spoke directly to my soul. And then to see Kanye go in this direction, it's like, damn, pour out a little liquor for the homie Kanye, because that N-word is gone and he is not coming back. And it's so ironic because, rap music and hip hop culture in general used to be viewed as the counterculture, as at least some facets of it were rebel music and resistance music. And of course that has changed over time. But should we just look at these fools as straight up capitalist Republicans? These people do not necessarily have the interest of the community at heart, but yet will take on some of the language of the organizers and some of the radical folks, but certainly try to spin it in a direction towards Donald Trump, using the Democratic plantation sort of imagery and talking points set forth by a lot of Black conservatives, like, get off the plantation. It's like, dog, you want a plantation too. What makes you think that you're not? What are your thoughts, Kenneth?
Yeah. To answer your question, they are capitalist Republicans, low key, no matter how they try to spin it. And I believe that these men, Ice Cube, Lil Wayne, 50 Cent, they feel that their proximity to whiteness, which is wealth, takes them off of the plantation. And I think that they think that they're above us regular Black folks who are out in the streets working, or anybody who isn't a millionaire. But the fact of the matter is, they're still Black and they don't realize that. And it's disheartening because so much of their fan bases are Black people, people of color who are suffering because of Trump, who are suffering because of a failed response to the pandemic, who are suffering because of a lot of Trump's policies. So to me, when I see them, shucking and jiving like the coons that they are, because they are coons. When I see that, it's like a direct slap in the face to so many Black folk and people of color, period, who have supported their mediocre music throughout the years, who have supported their mediocre initiatives. It's just really sad. You know what I'm saying? And I don't have time for it.
It's really disappointing. And, I was just thinking about the ways in which, Black celebrity is sort of repackaged to us in the form of like Black leadership, right? And it's like, I don't think the white community is looking to Brad Pitt and like, what does Brad Pitt think? Or, what is Justin Bieber's take on the Maricopa County Attorney General's race? Like Black celebrity or Black celebrities have an opportunity to sort of position themselves as leaders. And then conversely, we have a lot of Black activists and organizers who themselves want to be celebrities. That is probably a different conversation. But Ashton, I mean, the days of the Harry Belafonte, the Sidney Poitier, the Jim Brown, the activist athlete for the most part, and celebrity outside of Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reed and those gentlemen who are very much still going hard. But why is it that some Black celebs are vaulted into these leadership positions, are taken seriously, are asked about these political races, et cetera, of which they don't really have a whole lot of knowledge or insight about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the Republican parties know that all you need is a popular Black face that, folks can connect to and relate to on some level. So like Kenny was saying, whether it's the mediocre music or their persona of like, oh, this person is a very honest person. Like, when has Ice Cube not been 100 with you? When has Lil Wayne or 50 Cent not been 100 with you? And maybe I'm gonna be a bajillionaire like them one day. And so I need to start listening to them because I don't want to get taxed in X, Y, and Z. And so I think that when you see that celebrity that you relate to, Republicans know that some folks are not going to look on a deeper level there. Because I think a lot of times with the Democratic Party, especially in this election, it's not necessarily that we love Biden and Kamala that much. It's that we hate Trump that much. But when you have someone in the middle who's a cultural influencer and a cultural shifter in a sense, who gives the Republicans what they need for that right check or the right notoriety or for some falsehood of a plan, then it's very easy to galvanize Black people because we have more trust for Lil Wayne or for 50 Cent or for Ice Cube based on our nostalgia for them and the moments that they've created in our lives. And so I think that that's where it gets tough. We don't fall in love with like a Maxine Waters or Congressman John Lewis or Angela Rye in the same type of way. And so I think that we have to start putting some of those folks on a pedestal in terms of our politics. You know what I'm saying? Just like you wouldn't expect a scholar to be the headliner at a concert. We don't make these Black celebrities a headliner in your politics and in your daily lives, right? Because I think like Kenny was saying, there's a proximity to whiteness that these Black celebrities feel. And I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but that proximity to whiteness won't save them and it can't save them. And if it happens to save them, it won't save their children or their children's children or their cousins or other human beings. And that should be the standard. And so it's very unfortunate, but there definitely has to be a mindset shift there.
Yes. And I'm trying to debate here on where we should go. Actually, Kenny, while it's still light outside, would you mind taking us to your event happening right now in Detroit?
Yeah. Now it's loud. The DJ is loud, so I might not be able to hear you guys if you have questions, but yes. Let me do that right now.
So
okay, I can tell you guys what it is. I'm gonna have to flip my camera. Hey.
Look at Kenny, big man out there in Detroit. I love it.
So the event in question that I'm at right now is called Freaking Vote Friday. And this is the fourth one that we've had. And this is like our last push. But really, we're trying to get the youth out and engaged to vote. We're trying to get them to the polls, really. So we have like musical performers. We have like a live DJ. We have a food truck. We got a game truck. This was a long walk, so I promise I'm almost there. But we also had this local rapper. He's not local anymore. I'm sorry. He's a rapper from Detroit. His name is Icewear Vezo, and he's all about he's all about this stuff, like building power for Black and brown folks. So, excuse me, out of breath, actually.
You're fine. Turn your camera around. Let's see. I want to see what you're looking at. Okay, here we go. 313. Everybody from the 313, put your hands up in the club. Follow me. Come on.
Down a little bit. Hey, Javay. So this is a sign-in table for Freaking Vote Friday. This is Javay.
Yeah, all that stuff. Our hand sanitizer, our hand sanitizer. You gotta make sure you have a
Right.
Thank you for everything. Woo!
Thank you. Woo! You can see it's dying down, but we have the DJ over there. And so this is like our Freaking Vote Friday. And you can see, I'm going to take y'all to the... So this is our ballot protection. This is Kelsey and Taylor and T.
Uh-oh, I think he's freezing up a little bit.
I'll square it up a little bit. All right, I'm going to return back to the car because it's like slow down. Or can y'all see? All right, it's no service back here, but here is the gist of it. And I'm about to return to the car because it's dying down.
That's cool. Dwayne, do me a favor. Car. It's okay. Dwayne, can you mute him until he gets back to his car? Okay. Wonderful. Okay. No, honey, you're fine. I just wanted to get turned down a little bit until you get back to the car. So that's all good. No problem. Kenny's going to rejoin us in just a second. And we're still here with Ashton. And, as we sort of, for one, applaud what Detroit Action is doing out there with getting young people, especially engaged and registered. Sometimes the issue is not necessarily registering to vote. The issue is, can you actually cast a vote when you have arrived at the polling place? And despite the fact that, say, for example, a state like New York is not in play nationally, and a lot of races there are kind of already a foregone conclusion. People are just showing up, to do the final deed. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was speaking to the press, I think it was just a day or two ago, about how not having enough polling places, adequate and working polling machines, enough people to work the polls. Of course, we are dealing with the pandemic, so it's some special circumstances there. But she addressed the media and she made a lot of very salient points. Can we check out AOC, please? Still? Oh, yes, we can. Thank you, Kenny. Thank you. Don't apologize. First of all, that is a grassroots event, live and in color, right there, and I love it. So thank you very much for you and your crew putting something together, and it looked like fun. I mean, shoot, they had DJ and everything out there.
That's why I'm so out of breath, because I was dancing, so it was fun.
Fantastic. Alrighty, guys. So, do we have any videos that I can play? You keep telling me to hold on, and I'm gonna hold on and throw this computer all the way out the window. But not while we live. I won't do that while we live. Ashton, let me pivot back to you and talk about some things going on in California. Obviously, it's been a rough year for Cali. In addition to the COVID pandemic really hitting, especially the Los Angeles area, especially hard. The wildfires out there, a natural catastrophe for all intents and purposes. And, the ongoing police brutality that is happening amongst the LA County Sheriff's Department, the LAPD, And we know a lot of these issues are not probably going to be resolved this election cycle. But what is on the table, to your knowledge, in terms of either reform efforts or budget efforts? How have those efforts been fruitful or unsuccessful as best you know?
So I've been a part of a protest here and there, and so I know that for being at a school right now at UCLA, I know the Black students have sort of been galvanizing, and some schools have been trying to be more considerate of the circumstances. But part of that has been Black people galvanizing and demanding it. I know people have come at. Of course, LAPD really trying to seek defunding efforts and things of that nature. And so the conversation is happening. The demands are being made. The protests are happening constantly. But we also understand that, it's sometimes it can feel like gradualism, right? So it's like we're slowly moving, hoping to get somewhere at some point. But I got to say that I am very proud of not only my circle of friends, but LA in general. Every time I talk to someone, everyone I go to my feed, we might be protesting right outside of the LAPD building. We might be coming at the mayor. We might be saying something to the police chief. But the fighting is continuing on a big level, and it's consistent. And you sort of feel that in the air. And it's sort of like you were saying, Kim, you had the wildfires, you have the earthquakes. We're in a pandemic. More unarmed Black people have been killed by LAPD, right, since the George Floyd situation. And so people are realizing that the only thing that we have to lose are our chains. So people are putting it on the line each and every day. I've had friends who've gotten tased, arrested, all sorts of stuff, but people are continuing to move. And so I'm proud of California, but I'm not going to pretend like everything is peaches and cream. So I'm proud of the efforts, and I'm hoping that we can keep that resilience moving forward, because this is just one step in a 1,000-mile journey.
Well, I think we have some videos now, and I think we can play them. So, Dwayne, can we hear Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's comments about voter suppression in blue states?
Listen, there is no place in the United States of America where 2, 3, 4 hour waits to vote is acceptable. And just because it's happening in a blue state doesn't mean that it's not voter suppression. If we are waiting 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, if this was happening in a swing state, there would be national coverage. So I don't want us to think that just because this is a blue state that this isn't a problem. This is very clearly a problem. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. But that being said, at the same time, I am thrilled to see how many people who are overcoming this injustice, waiting in the lines anyway, bringing community supplies, snacks, lawn chairs. We are going to overcome this hurdle so that we can elect the folks that will make sure that this will not be a problem in the future.
When you say voter suppression, do you mean to suggest that you think here in New York City it's being done intentionally?
Listen, voter suppression, it could be intentional, it could be unintentional. I think that at the end of the day, if the line to your polling place is so long that you don't vote, that is a form of disenfranchisement. And so whether it's intentional or unintentional, to me, that is less a concern as it is that it's happening anyway. But you know what? Again, we've got so many people that are thrilled to vote. This is our first federal election, a general election where we have early voting. And frankly, we fought to get an extra early voting place. And frankly, this also shows the success of early voting as well. This is the first time that we've seen lines this long for early voting. Oh, yeah. So you know what? I'm extremely excited about that. And we're going to make sure that this is a smoother process.
Tell us why it's worth it for you and apparently for others to wait 2 or 3 hours to do this.
Well,
to make a change.
That's right, to make a change. And to me, what is important to me is that I want my vote counted the night that the polls close. And the way that we do that is by showing up in person. You know, if you can't show up in person, you don't want to show up in person, mail in that ballot. You can do it. If you haven't mailed it in yet, you can even show up to your local board of elections and hand it in person to make sure that it's delivered. And so you can do that. But I wanted to make sure that my vote was tallied the night that the polls close. So I will wait 2 hours, just like my neighbors are, to make sure that that happens. And it is a privilege and honor to do so.
How does it feel voting today after voting all these years?
Yeah, well, you know, voting every time is a very emotional experience for me. It never gets old to see that, you know, thousands of your neighbors have signed petitions to put your name on that ballot. And it's just a privilege every single time. I think that voting is a celebration, and it's a joyful event. I can't wait until Election Day is a federal holiday, and so people don't have to take off work or anything like that. I can't wait for us to expand mail-in voting so it happens every election, not just during a pandemic. I can't wait for us to expand early voting, because this is it's a tremendous honor.
Ashton and Kenny, I wanted to ask, you know, you both live in blue Democratic places. So do I. And, you know, I don't hear Democrats locally where I am, and you guys can share with me about what the leadership says where you are. But do they take up this issue of voting inadequacy or voting resources being inadequate in communities of color? Because a lot of these places are governed by Democrats. Baltimore City is governed by Democrats. You know, Los Angeles is governed by Democrats. Detroit's governed by and large by Democrats. Do the local politicians where you are say, hey, actually, we need to open more polling places instead of close polling places? Of course, I'm talking pre-pandemic. Pandemic has thrown shit all haywire, and we understand that. But prior to that, these long lines that we are so accustomed to seeing in Black and brown places, and the people who are in charge of providing resources to make sure that some of these weights and, you know, equipment and things can be upgraded. Do you see that happening where you are pre-pandemic, of course? Kenneth, let me start with you.
Yeah, so honestly, the people who I see speaking the most about these are people who are in the same space as myself, you know, grassroots organizations who, you know, are serving the community. Like, we're the ones who have been and are still talking about these issues. And I haven't seen really any Democratic candidates, local or otherwise, talk about these things, except Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. She does a really good job of talking about these things and bringing awareness. But everyone else, you know, other Democrats, I just have not seen it. I feel like there really hasn't been a space made to talk about the issues that affect working class Detroiters of color, unless we're the ones doing that stuff, or unless we have an ally like Congresswoman Tlaib. But other than that, I haven't seen any discussion of that.
I mean, Ashton, sometimes, and I'm thinking specifically about Barack and Michelle Obama, you know, they will encourage the Democratic base to pack a lunch, bring a chair, get comfortable, bring a book, putting all of the onus and the responsibility on the disenfranchised voter, the person who has to take off work from their hourly wage job in order to go cast a vote. They may actually lose work trying to vote. They may actually lose the opportunity to vote because they got to leave and go to work. What is your take, and what is the sentiment of that coming from perhaps Black Democrats where you are?
Yeah, so I haven't heard as much about those efforts, because I think that, like you said before, a lot of the onus is put on the folks who are sort of disenfranchised by this process the most, right? And so I think that, like AOC said, and she's someone else that people should be looking towards and sort of put on a pedestal in terms of her politics and policies. But it doesn't even matter whether it's intentional or not intentional, right? It's just what is. And so I think that we have to think a little bit more radically in terms of how do do we make this process as smooth as possible? And then for the future, how do we continue to restructure what a voting day looks like, or what early voting looks like? Because Kim, you made a great point. What if I'm leaving my job? What if I'm leaving some other type of important life obligation to come vote? You're asking me to maybe like do something that can really deter my life just to go and turn in a slip of paper. And so how do you make that process good for me, right? Because I think that sometimes we a lot of disenfranchised folks are told you should do this because it's for your good at some point, but they don't necessarily deal with, well, how's voting going to impact me today? And how's this process going to impact me today? And so unfortunately, not to say that it's not happening, but I haven't, before COVID, I wasn't hearing a lot about ways to make this transition smoother. I will say that when I've done like local election voting and things of that nature, the process was good because I was working with an institution with resources like UCLA makes it very easy. They take their little frat houses and they make them voting polls. And so I think being a little bit more creative with all these different ways and places that can be utilized for voting will be the most helpful thing to do.
Guys, I want to switch gears if we could for a moment, because we know that a large majority of 2020 was taken up by the catalyst of the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And we saw thousands of people in cities, big and small, across the country for many weeks and many months remain in the streets, not just for George Floyd, but for people like Breonna Taylor and so many others, Ahmaud Arbery. So many people still have been murdered unjustifiably by the police. And unfortunately, that continued this week. We're going to get to the situation in Philadelphia in just a moment, but I wanted to lead off with a story out of Washington, D.C. that many people may or may not be familiar with. It's a story of a young man. His name is Karan Hilton Brown. Now, he was not shot and killed by the police, but Karan's family believes that he was targeted by Metropolitan Police, which is DC Police. Anytime you hear MPD, people are talking about DC Police, Metropolitan Police, and got into an accident while on an electric scooter and eventually died as a result of his injuries. I want us to go to the package, Dwayne, from NBC Washington 4. Reporter Mark Seagraves did a decent job of covering some of the nuances about this. This tragic case of Karan is now under federal investigation. 4 officers are now on leave, and the chief of police in Washington, D.C. seems to admit that his officers were not following proper protocols, and as a result, people in D.C. took to the streets just to endure gassing, rubber bullets, kettling from Metropolitan Police, and mind you, all under the watchful eye of a Black mayor. So let's go to that NBC Washington package, Dwayne, if we could, please. Oh, wonderful. Okay, well, let's hear from one of Karan's family members who spoke with citizen journalist Chuck Modiano, who has been relentless in his coverage of the protests that have been going on since May and before. So can we go to that one, please?
You're defending the building. I'm defending my son, dude. Really? Really, dude? Really, dude?
Can we get Captain Porter to come out?
You defending the building. You know Karan. You know Karan. The nigga killed my son. You know Karan. You know Karan. And y'all defending this building. Y'all defending the fucking building. Where was y'all when this nigga was killing my son? Where was y'all? Did y'all do all this? Did y'all do all this when niggas was taking my son down? Officer Davis, you know what's up. My son, did y'all defend my son? You supposed to be on my side because of the building. A fucking building. A building. You don't do that, David. You got kids. You don't do that, David. You don't do that. How you let them do that? Why you let them do that?
But he put him in a hospital as a John Doe, which he had previous problems with that officer harassing him, which there's a video on Instagram with that same officer that hit Karan. And on the video, he pulled a car over and he called Karan by his name. He said, "Karan, get out the car." So how can he take him to the hospital under John Doe when he knew who he was all along?
By taking him as John Doe, did it make it difficult for the family to find him?
Yes, me and the mother was together that night when she got the phone call from her mother. Okay. We went to Howard. They said that he wasn't there. Okay. We went to Washington Hospital Center. They said they can't tell us nothing. So we told Washington Hospital Center someone's been hit, and she think it was her son and that he was unconscious. And they told her, give us your name and we will call you back if he comes in here. And they called her back like, 3 hours later?
And he was there the whole time?
And he was there the whole time.
Wow.
And that was the same officer that knew who he was that took him there under John Doe. And also had him laid out on the ground for 20 minutes before he called the ambulance.
Thank you.
And Dwayne, lastly, I wanted us to go to the video Chuck Modiano shot of the DC protester who had been participating in demonstrations surrounding the death of Karan Hilton. Because again, DC, DMV, Black Lives, shout out to April Goggins and her whole team and everyone else that comes out in the many different grassroots organizations in and around the DMV. They show up on them streets, baby, understand it. And this young woman who we're about to hear from, she was one of the only protesters who faced arrest during these most recent demonstrations. And she gave Muriel Bowser the business. Let's listen to that. Can we, Dwayne?
She wants to throw us all in jail and arrest her political opponents. Wow, the same thing that Trump wants to do right now. Chad Wolf just went on Fox News and said the same exact thing. So if Bowser is a black woman, if you truly want to identify with your own community, then why would you agree with somebody like Chad Wolf?
And I think you're referring specifically to the 42 people who were kettled and arrested about almost 3 weeks ago, correct?
Yeah, so she wants to prosecute all of them, and she also wants to prosecute all 19 people that were arrested over this past weekend, and all of those illegal arrests and extrajudicial abuse that we went through at Black Lives Matter Plaza. She doesn't want to address her cops for committing crime. They literally committed war crimes against the Geneva Convention. It's like, you can look it up. It was also signed into law by Mayor Bayang not to use chemical agents on protesters, but yet here she is, letting her police officers, letting her army, letting her street team of fucking thugs and gangs, that's what the fuck this shit is. She's letting them abuse us and letting them break laws and say we're the lawbreakers. Crime is clearly subjective. We can see that. They can commit crime all day. They can violate our rights all day, and none of them have been prosecuted. Fuck qualified immunity. Abolish the fucking police.
And last thing, I think you're referring to this past weekend, especially Saturday and Sunday, when chemicals and pepper spray and rubber bullets were used. Were you referring to that?
Yes. Collective punishment is illegal. Collective punishment is illegal. It is a war crime. And especially because chemical warfare within DC is also illegal. Mayor Bowser signed that. She signed that into legislation. Nobody else did that, but yet she could not condemn her own police force for disobeying her own rules. But you want to prosecute us for exercising our First Amendment right, for fighting for our rights, for demanding our right to exist. You want to prosecute us instead of actually condemning the people you need to condemn, which is the MPD.
Yeah, young lady coming with that fire. Yeah. Yes, go to Chuck Modiano's Twitter page, because he actually did post a link for direct support for her. She was arrested. I'm not 100% sure whether or not she has been released, and I don't know her name right off, but as you see, she is on top of things. So, gentlemen, in addition to what happened to Karan, of course, the horrible shooting of the young man in Philadelphia who was experiencing a mental health crisis. Police shot him in front of his parents, and the city got tore up as a result. And 2 days ago, when Joe Biden, Democratic nominee for president, went to the polls to cast his vote in Wilmington, Delaware, he early voted along with his wife. He was asked about the uprising situation in Philadelphia. And here is what Joe Biden had to say.
What I say is that there is no excuse whatsoever for the looting and the violence. None whatsoever. I think to be able to protest is totally legitimate. It's totally reasonable, but I think that the looting is just, as the victim's father said, do not do this. It's not what my son, you're not helping, you're hurting, you're not helping my son. And there are certain things we're going to have to do as we move along, and I think I know the local folks in Philadelphia are thinking about it as well, and that is how we deal with how you diminish the prospect of lethal shooting in circumstances like the one we saw. That's going to be part of the commission I set up to determine how we deal with these changes. But there's no excuse for the loot.
Kenneth, Joe Biden is the Democratic nominee. Cities like Detroit and Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. are controlled by Democrats. And yet we're seeing a lot of some of the most egregious police violence against protesters and people who support the movement for Black lives taking place against Black and brown bodies in the streets. A lot of people are going to have to hold their nose and vote for Joe Biden, especially because of his stance on police. He doesn't support defunding the police or abolishing the police. In fact, he wants to give the police more money. How can Democrats really make this sell to Black voters, given their unwillingness to sort of hear what the streets have been calling for many months and even before 2020, but definitely loud as hell since 2020 has been 2020 this entire year? What are your thoughts?
I don't know that they can make this sell at all. I think I think it boils down to us as Black folks, really just holding our nose and just saying, hey, we'll put him in office. It's the lesser of two evils. So I don't know. You can't sell these things. You can't sell the police force killing unarmed Black folks in the street all the time and, murdering us like we're animals and whatnot. You can't sell that. Like, it's still defund the police for a lot of us. And it's always going to be that. So I think it just boils down to us, like I was saying, we're going to hold our nose. We're going to put you in office, but we're also going to hold him accountable, because I didn't like when he called it looting or violence. No, this is a rebellion against a system that subordinates us and puts us at the bottom always and has for centuries. So those are my thoughts.
Dwayne, pop up that Walmart video, if you could, for a moment. And I'm going to talk over it. It's only like 30 some seconds. It should be at the bottom of the doc if you find it. Because Ashton, the first words out Joe Biden's mouth weren't my condolences and thoughts to the family. He said, I do not condone the looting. And this is some video of the Walmart in North Philadelphia. Shout out to my Temple Owls. I'm sure there was some Temple Owls up in there grabbing them some sweats and some juice boxes. And, my take on, and then again, this is just my opinion here, but my take on quote unquote looting, first of all, what has been taken from Black and brown communities over the past few hundred years on this continent alone, honey, they'd have to be looting 100 Walmart stores a day for about 500, 600 years to even come close to making up for what has been taken from Black and Indigenous people. So let's start with that conversation. But this insistence from not only the Democratic establishment, but really just American capitalists at large, that the looting cannot be tolerated, while they fail to acknowledge that if police would stop murdering Black bodies, then this type of actions would not happen. The violence starts from the side of the police, and this is the outcome of that. And for some reason, that part of the equation, Ashton, it never gets factored in, and it certainly never gets centered as part of the story. It's always about the property damage and the quote unquote violence, protest turned violent. They say that, not saying that the police actually turned the protest violence when they started gassing people and shooting them with rubber bullets. What is this insistence about protecting the interests of capital over the actual human lives of the victims of police violence?
And I think that's a great question, and it's so complicated. I think that Michael Eric Dyson said something that was really, really great. He was like, even if you're a Black person and because first of all, I'm not worried about the Waltons, losing real money. They're a corporation with billions upon billions of dollars. So no one's that concerned about Walmart. But even for the Black folks who are small business owners who might have been impacted by certain actions in the rebellion, like Kenny was talking about, Kim, to your point, it's like Michael Eric Dyson said that if you don't own the right to tell a cop not to kill you, or that I can't breathe in George Floyd's case, then you don't really have anything that's worth owning. Right? You have to be alive to be able to enjoy your business. You have to be alive to be able to pursue liberty and happiness, right? And I think that that's something that people like Joe Biden are missing. And I think to Kenny's point, it gets back to us having to hold our noses and vote for the quote unquote lesser of two evils. But what I don't think what Biden doesn't realize is that there's a lot of ignorance in what he is saying, because he doesn't realize that he's actually participating in a dog whistle. Because when you say and you center things like looting and rioting, like you were saying, Kim, it's galvanizing conservatives to say, oh yeah, I don't care what's happening to these black folks because they're violent, they're thugs, all they want to do is rob. And meanwhile, we're fighting for our lives. Black people have contributed trillions of dollars to the U.S. economy just based on slavery alone, right? And so there's never enough for us to riot and quote unquote loot that could actually put America in a deficit that they've put us in. And so I think that when Biden speaks, especially when we're a few days out from the election, he has to center Black lives. He has to center the domestic terrorism that is happening. He has to think about police academies, police buildings, police stations, unions, whatever. He has to think about them like schools, right? Like people defund schools and schools still operate. So why can't we use these funds from the police get to, galvanize and empower Black and brown communities? But he's not seeing that. And it's very unfortunate that even with us being in a few days of the election, he's still so tone deaf. He doesn't read the room. He doesn't know how to read the room. And to be honest with you, I think that there's so many people in power, these billionaire companies and corporations that probably move so much of our society in a particular type of way that Joe Biden is trying to navigate those relationships. But this is a time where you have to draw a line in the sand. And unfortunately, he's standing on the wrong side of that line.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's concern from the Biden camp, obviously Pennsylvania being such a tenuous state that could go either way in this election. Donald Trump has already made some comments saying that, first of all, condemning the actions that happened in Philadelphia and making a case as to why he's the law and order president, and under under Donald Trump, that kind of stuff wouldn't happen, although he is president and it totally did happen. That's kind of inconsequential at this point, because Donald Trump is just going to point the finger at Philadelphia being a democratically run place. And this is why Democrats shouldn't lead nationally, et cetera, et cetera. But sort of piggybacking on that sentiment about law and order, if you're living in New York City, you may have seen some social media videos or even experienced it in your own neighborhood where some members of the NYPD, while not only in full uniform, also in marked patrol cars, have been openly advocating, campaigning for Donald Trump's reelection. Now, we're going to look at about 3 quick videos. The first video is former New York City mayor and Trump confidant, or even his attorney, at different points in time, Rudy Giuliani riding along with New York City Police Department. And let's look at what happened. And then in the subsequent videos, be listening. You're going to hear the cops on their patrol car loudspeaker openly advocate for Donald Trump while on duty, while on uniform, and first and foremostly, while on the taxpayer's dime. Let's take a look at those videos, please.
Fucking scum! Gentlemen! Kenneth!
On the sidewalk, the street, on the sidewalk. Guys, fuck you!
ass motherfuckers! What the fuck did you think was going on here? You fucking cowards, go back to fucking Long Island! Fucking scumbag!
Do it again. What, you can't say Trump 2020 now? Fucking pussy. Say it again.
Trump 2020.
Go fuck yourself, you fucking fascist.
Trump 2020. Put it on YouTube. Put it on Facebook. Trump 2020. Take a picture, take a video. Put it on your Facebook. Put it on your YouTube. Have some fun. Tough guy, tough guy.
So the first part of the videos we saw was the Trump caravan, where Rudy Giuliani was riding with a bunch of Trump supporters through New York, and you saw the welcome they perhaps received from New Yorkers. But the last two videos a bit more disturbing, and while seemingly innocuous, it's really not. When police are openly supporting a fascist, as Donald Trump is. And I don't even think that's in dispute at this point, y'all. And if he wins, it could imply more dire consequences for Black and brown people, especially. But the thing that Trump, that makes him most scary is the fact that law enforcement is backing him. So if Donald Trump, decided not to accept the results of the election, that could show that, Joe Biden won the popular and electoral vote. He could challenge the credibility of that, and he could have literally thousands of police officers who are so beholden to his ethos of law and order and his bombast and his racist rhetoric, that they could ride with him in a way that perhaps we have not seen before in this country. Ashton, let me start with you, and then Kenny, I'll come to you next. Does that scare you when you see police openly advocating and supporting Donald Trump while in uniform, while on the clock, and while sitting in a marked vehicle and talking shit to the public?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's scary. It's not surprising. This administration, 45, because I can't acknowledge that man as a president, but he has given police officers every I guess right to feel comfortable with saying whatever they want and doing whatever they want. And to be honest, just because of the laws that are in place and the way that structural racism works, police officers have the ability to get away with anything, to say anything, and to do anything. And so to think about what it might be like if Trump refuses to leave office, it's terrifying. But this is why we were talking earlier about Black people sort of holding their noses and taking the vote, because it's not just about Trump. It's about the people he inspires. It's about the people he galvanizes. It's about his administration, who are doing the secret covert racist things in their policies and their words and their speech. And so Trump is a whole machine. And so this is what we have to think about, right? Because when you decide not to vote, when you vote for Trump, you're voting for this machine, and you have no idea just how deep the machine is and who all is connected to it. And so to answer your question, Kim, it's beyond terrifying, and hopefully that fear encourages people to vote the lesser of the two evils.
Mm-hmm. And Kenny, this is a little different than the Wolverine watchmen, the alleged domestic terrorists in your neck of the woods who were plotting to overthrow the governor, kidnap her, hold her for treason. NYPD actually has legal guns, and technically they have the legal authority to kill us and sprinkle some crack afterwards and make all kinds of excuses. the fact that law enforcement, in at least from these videos that we saw, is so staunchly in favor of the president. How do you interpret that, and what does that mean for perhaps a defeat of Donald Trump? Because if he loses, he may not actually leave, and he could have an army of law enforcement at his back to make sure that he remains in power.
Well, I think that's the terrifying part, that he could have an army of law enforcement people, law enforcement officials at his beck and call to cause Lord knows what kind of mayhem. I mean, I think people, we almost expect for him to, we almost expect for like the white supremacists in Michigan, I use that as an example because that's where I live. We almost expect for these like Kid Rock listening, Confederate flag waving, I want to storm the Capitol and try to kidnap the governor type of white supremacists, these domestic terrorists. We expect them to like be, his homeboys and whatnot, trying to cause all sorts of shit. But the thing is, like, the fact that these police officers are so gung-ho over him, that's very frightening, because they can hide behind the uniform and you don't know which one of these people are you don't know which one of these officers are supporting Trump. And the fact that he could really, at the sound of a whistle, call on the literal police force to like do his damage and do his dirty work and be his little Trump's angels or his dirty minions, that's frightening, because that's a whole police force. You know what I'm saying? And we know that the police force is racist because it's rooted in being a slave patrol, but still it doesn't get any less frightening, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. And gentlemen, this is going to be probably election unlike anything that we have ever seen in our lifetime. And like I was telling y'all beforehand, I think I was 20 or 21 in 2000. I guess I should be able to do that math pretty easy, but I was in my early 20s, and we were covering election night, and we were stunned. Like, we didn't really know how to take the fact that, number one, the election was not decided the same night, and even by the following day, it took several weeks later. But just the capitulation of the Democratic Party to sort of go along with the pressures coming from the Bush people and the Supreme Court, et cetera, et cetera. So we're not going to know exactly what is what Wednesday morning. But I certainly appreciate you both checking in with me to sort of give us a little taste of what to expect and sort of take the temperature of what's going on in everyone's respective places. Today, we have been joined with Kenneth Williams. He is the communication director for Detroit Action. He's also a pop culture writer and on-air host for Blavity News. And Ashton Pemberton has been joining us. He is pursuing his PhD in studying race and higher education at UCLA. Thank you both for making time to come by here and chop it up with me. I appreciate it. I hope to have you both on back sometime in the very, very, very near future.
Thank you so much, Kim. I really appreciate it. And thank you for letting me do this with my best friend, Ashton, too. So. Yeah.
Thank y'all so much for the opportunity. This was great, and it's always great to speak with other great minds and really like iron sharpen iron, and for the audience to really think about this, because these are very, very intense times. So we got to have each other's backs.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I want to thank everyone that tuned in today for Burn It Down with Kim Brown. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. You can also check us out as a podcast available on Spotify, iTunes, or podcast, something of that nature, and Google Podcast, I believe, as well. Don't forget, Tuesday, Election Day. Keep it here to the real news starting at 5 o'clock for Burn It Down with Kim Brown. We are going to be giving you the Election Day coverage and election night coverage, really, that you really want to hear. You don't want to hear the talking heads of CNN and MSNBC. Come right here to the real news. It will be kicking off at 5 p.m. with Burn It Down. We will also be doing a joint broadcast with the good folks from, what's the name of the podcast? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I just drew blank. That's right. The Tightrope. Yes. Professors Trisha Rose and Dr. Cornell West. Looking forward very much to the coverage and insight that they're going to bring to us on election night. So don't forget to keep it here to the real news on election day and night. I'm your host, Kim Brown. I will see y'all on Tuesday. Have a great weekend. Don't forget, keep COVID up off of you. Wash your hands, social distance, wear your mask. See you later. Bye.